Okay, so you sent a bunch of articles or opinion pieces my way about what's going on in Washington, and wow, it is a lot to process. Trump's back in the White House.
Right.
Elon Musk is doing his thing with the Department of Government Oversight, and there's even talk of a potential constitutional crisis.
It is a lot, isn't it? It does feel like things are moving really fast, too. Like what used to be considered fringe or even unthinkable is now just kind of our everyday reality.
Yeah, I mean, remember when we thought Trump claiming Greenland was just like a weird Twitter rant?
Oh, yeah.
But now he's got Elon Musk right there with him echoing those same sentiments.
Yeah.
And even taking it a step further with that comment to Trudeau about not being the governor of Canada anymore.
Yeah, and that dismissive attitude, that kind of like blatant disregard for these, international norms and agreements.
Yeah.
It's part of a larger trend, I think.
Okay.
Some people are calling it the Putinization of global politics.
Putin is...
Yeah. It's basically like prioritizing brute force
Okay.
over diplomacy.
Got it.
Personal loyalty over actual expertise.
Yeah.
And really creating this climate of fear and intimidation.
So it's not just talk.
Yeah.
We're seeing it play out in some pretty concerning ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with what's going down at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
I mean, firing General Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Right.
I mean, that's not just some political shakeup. It's a
big deal.
Yeah, a huge shift in how power is wielded in the U.S.
For sure. And, the fact that General Brown was only 16 months into his term, and he was only the second African-American to hold this position, I mean, it just adds this whole other layer of complexity to it.
Yeah.
This idea of breaking with tradition, where the chairman typically serves across administrations to avoid making it a partisan appointment. It's just... It's really troubling.
It's like Trump's trying to create his own personal military force loyal to him.
Yeah.
And not necessarily to the Constitution.
Yeah. I mean,
or the country.
That's a scary thought.
And his choice of replacement, LT Gen Dan Kane, is like a whole bunch more red flags.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pulling a retired 3-star officer out of retirement, promoting him. I mean, it's not unheard of, but...
But when you combine that with the stories about Kane's alleged... declaration of loyalty to Trump back in 2018. I mean,
it paints a pretty...
It's not a good look.
Disturbing picture.
It's not. It really suggests that Trump is prioritizing personal allegiance over, experience competence and really just adherence to established norms. It's a dangerous precedent.
Right.
And one that I think has a lot of people worried about the future of the U.S. military.
Okay, so we've got Trump shaking up the military, Musk wielding his chainsaw at CPAC, and this whole Putinization thing looming large.
Yeah, that's a lot.
A lot to take in, and it's honestly pretty scary.
It is a lot, and it's understandable to feel overwhelmed by all of this.
Right.
But remember, knowledge is power, and understanding what's happening is kind of the first step in figuring out how to respond.
Okay, so let's talk about Musk and DOGE, his Department of Government Oversight.
Yeah.
He's making headlines with these sweeping cuts to government agencies. And it's causing a lot of anxiety, even among his own supporters.
It's not just the cuts themselves.
Oh.
It's how they're being implemented. This whole image of Musk at CPAC with the chainsaw sunglasses and a Maguire hat.
I saw that.
Shouted.
It was hard to miss.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. I mean, it's almost comical, but it's also kind of terrifying.
It's like a bad reality TV show.
Right.
But the consequences are real. We're talking about the NIH Department of Education, the IRS, even the National Nuclear Security Administration. I mean,
These are not just
abstract entities.
Abstract things. They provide vital services. They play a crucial role in our society.
Yeah. And while some people argue that these agencies are bloated and inefficient, the speed and scope of these cuts is...
Yeah, it's alarming. There's very little transparency or accountability.
Right.
And it raises concerns about whether these decisions are actually being made based on sound judgment or if they're just being driven by ideology and a desire to dismantle the government.
And let's not forget that DOGE has already received $40 million in taxpayer money.
Where's that money going? What's the long-term plan? I think those are questions that deserve answers.
Yeah. Transparency is pretty crucial in a democracy.
It's essential.
And without it, we're just left with speculation and distrust.
Exactly.
Especially when you combine that with the fact that you have these unelected individuals like Musk who are basically in charge of these agencies with very little oversight.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
It's unsettling. Remember that story about the 24-year-old DOGE staffer who just showed up?
Yep.
At IRS headquarters and
Yep.
demanded access to
Sensitive financial information.
sensitive financial information. I mean,
Yeah.
that sends chills down my spine.
It does. It raises serious concerns about the competency and the judgment of the people leading DOGE.
Right.
And it also highlights this lack of oversight and accountability
Right.
surrounding the agency's actions, who's vetting these staffers, what are their qualifications,
Right.
and what safeguards are in place to actually prevent abuses of power.
Yeah, those are all good questions.
Yeah, and unfortunately it seems like the answers are elusive at best.
Right. It's like we're on this runaway train with no brakes and no clear destination in sight.
It does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it? Like hurtling down a path,
Yeah.
no guardrails,
Yeah.
no clear destination.
Okay, but let's zoom out for a sec.
Yeah.
What does all of this actually mean for,
Right.
everyday people?
Yeah.
Is this just political drama, or is there something more fundamental happening here? Oh, it's definitely more than just political theater. I think what we're seeing is a really fundamental shift in the way that power is exercised in America. And it's not just happening in Washington. It's a trend we're seeing globally.
So you mean this Putinization thing?
Exactly. It's the normalization of these strongman tactics, the erosion of democratic norms, a growing disregard for the rule of law.
Yeah.
And it's not just about Trump or Musk. It's
Right.
this broader societal shift that we need to be paying attention to.
So it's like the rules of the game are changing and we're all trying to figure out how to play by this new, more aggressive playbook.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's creating this climate of anxiety and uncertainty.
Yeah.
People feel like they're losing control, like the institutions that are supposed to protect them are failing.
And it's not just about feeling anxious. There are real-world consequences to these shifts.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the impact of, DOGE's cuts on scientific research, education, healthcare, or the potential for, abuse of power. When you have individuals like Musk and Patel who are demonstrably loyal
Right.
to Trump in charge of these agencies with little to no oversight.
It's a recipe for disaster corruption,
Oh, yeah,
cronyism, and further erosion of public trust.
absolutely. And you know what? It creates a chilling effect on dissent.
How so?
Well, if you know that speaking out against those in power could result in you being targeted or silenced or even prosecuted,
Yeah.
you're a lot less likely to speak up in the first place.
It's scary. That's what's so insidious about all of this. It's not just about the specific actions. It's about this atmosphere of fear and intimidation they're creating.
Exactly. And that's what allows authoritarianism to flourish. When people are afraid to speak their minds, when they're afraid to challenge
Sure.
those in power, that's when democracy withers and dies.
So it's not just about Trump or Musk. It's about a deeper societal malaise, a willingness to tolerate, even embrace these authoritarian tendencies.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think it's something we need to grapple with. Why are so many people willing to turn a blind eye to these abuses of power? Why are they so quick to dismiss those who speak out as, alarmists or enemies of the people?
I think part of it is that people are just exhausted.
Yeah.
They're tired of the constant chaos
Right.
and division. And they're just looking for someone to offer them stability and certainty, even if it comes at the expense of their freedoms.
And I think there's also a sense of disillusionment with the existing system.
Okay.
People feel like they've been left behind, like the system isn't working for them.
Yeah.
And they're willing to try something new, even if it's something that ultimately undermines their own interests.
It's complex. It's not easily solved.
Yeah.
But I think the first step is awareness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We need to recognize these dangerous trends, and we need to understand what's at stake.
Right. And we need to be having these conversations not just among ourselves, but with our friends, family members, communities. We need to talk about what's happening, why it matters, and what we can do about it.
Okay, so awareness is crucial. What about action?
Right.
What can we actually do to push back against these trends?
Yeah, it's easy to feel helpless in the face of these, massive forces.
Right.
But there are things we can do. It starts with being informed and engaged. Read credible news sources.
Okay.
Follow independent journalists. And for goodness sake, fact check everything you see on social media.
Right. Don't just share headlines or memes without understanding the context.
Please.
And be wary of that emotionally charged language
Yeah.
and sensationalized stories.
So much of that.
It's easy to get swept up in the outrage, but it's important to take a step back
Absolutely.
and evaluate the information carefully.
That's great advice. And, Don't be afraid to speak up, to
Okay.
challenge misinformation,
Yeah.
to call out those who are spreading it.
Even if it feels like you're shouting into the void.
It might, but you never know who you might reach or what impact you might have, right? Even if it's just having a conversation with friend or family member is repeating something they saw on Facebook,
Right.
it's about planting seeds of doubt
Mm.
and encouraging critical thinking.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about our elected officials.
Right.
They work for us, and we have a right to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Contact your representatives, even if they belong to the party in power, and let them know that you're paying attention,
Right.
that you expect them to uphold the Constitution,
Yes.
and that you're holding them responsible for their actions.
It's easy to feel like our voices don't matter, but they do.
They do.
And when enough people speak up, those in power are forced to listen.
Absolutely. And let's not underestimate the power of collective action.
Okay.
Support organizations that are fighting to protect democratic values and institutions.
Right.
You know, there are so many groups working to ensure transparency, accountability, the rule of law.
Yeah, and participate in peaceful protests and
Yeah.
demonstrations. It's about making our voices heard and
Yeah.
showing those in power.
Yes, that we will not stand idly by
Right.
while they dismantle our democracy.
Exactly. And remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
This is a long-term struggle, and there will be setbacks. But we can't give up hope. We need to be persistent, we need to be resilient, and we need to believe that a better world is possible.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, this global trend of Putinization
Right.
and the specific actions of Trump and Musk. But let's bring it back to the Pentagon for a minute.
Okay.
This firing of General Brown has sent shockwaves
It has.
through the military and beyond. What are the potential consequences of this move?
Well, it's hard to overstate the significance of this decision. You know, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the highest-ranking military officer in the U.S. Armed Forces. They advise the president on military matters,
Right.
and they're responsible for ensuring the readiness and effectiveness of the military.
Right.
To have someone in that position who is seen as being personally loyal to the president
Yeah.
rather than to the Constitution and the country, it's just a dangerous precedent.
It raises concerns about the politicization of the military.
Exactly. The military is supposed to be apolitical, you know, serving the nation,
Right.
not a particular party or individual. But Trump's actions are blurring those lines,
Yeah.
and it's creating a lot of unease and uncertainty within the ranks.
And it's not just about the potential for the military to be used for political purposes.
Right.
It's about the impact on morale and readiness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If service members feel like their leadership is more concerned with pleasing the president than with their well-being and the effectiveness of the military, it can erode trust and morale, and that can have a really negative impact on readiness and the ability of the military to actually carry out its missions.
And let's not forget about the global implications.
Oh, of course. The U.S. military is the most powerful military in the world.
Right.
Its actions have consequences far beyond our borders. If other countries perceive the U.S. military as being politicized or unreliable, it can undermine our alliances and destabilize the global order.
Okay, so the stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
And it's not just about the military. It's about the entire fabric of our democracy being threatened.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is a systematic dismantling of the checks and balances
Right.
that are designed to prevent the concentration of power and to protect our freedoms.
It's like they're chipping away at the foundation of our democracy, one institution at a time.
And it's happening slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly. You know, it's easy to dismiss each individual action as not that big of a deal, but when you step back and look at the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it's clear that something very dangerous is happening.
And it's not just happening in the U.S. We're seeing similar trends around the world.
Oh, absolutely. It's a global phenomenon fueled by a combination of factors.
Like what?
Well, you know, economic inequality, social media, the rise of nationalist and populist movements.
It's scary. And it's a dangerous trend because it threatens the very foundation of democracy and the rule of law.
We're seeing this rise in authoritarian leaders who are dismantling democratic institutions, silencing dissent,
Right.
consolidating power. And they're often doing it with the support of a significant portion of the population who are drawn to their promises of strength, stability, and this return to a sort of mythical past.
Okay, so we've got this global trend of Putinization, and we've got Trump and Musk kind of leading the charge here in the U.S.
Right.
It's a bleak picture, but I'm curious, how are other countries reacting to all of this?
It's a mixed bag. Some countries are expressing alarm and concern, while others are taking more of a wait-and-see approach.
Got it.
But it's clear that the U.S. is losing its moral authority
Yeah.
on the world stage.
Right. And that has real-world consequences
Of course.
for our alliances
Mm-hmm.
and our ability to influence global events.
Exactly. And it creates a vacuum that authoritarian leaders like Putin are all too happy to fill.
Okay, so we've talked about the global implications, the impact on the military, and the erosion of democratic norms. But let's bring it back to the human level for a moment.
Yeah.
How are everyday people experiencing these shifts?
Yeah.
How are their lives being affected?
It's important to remember that behind the headlines and all the political maneuvering, there are real people whose lives are being impacted by these decisions.
Of course.
Think about the scientists whose research is being defunded by DOGE's cuts,
Yeah.
the teachers who are losing their jobs, the patients who are losing access to health care.
And the families that are struggling to make ends meet as the cost of living continues to rise while wages stagnate.
Right. And it's not just about the economic impact, it's about the emotional toll as well.
There's this feeling of anxiety,
Oh, yeah.
fear, and uncertainty that kind of pervades our society.
People are worried about the future, about their safety,
Yeah.
about the direction of the country. And that's taking a toll on their mental and emotional well-being.
And it's creating divisions within families, communities,
Right.
even the country as a whole.
It's like we're living in two different realities, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to find common ground.
Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about some of the more disturbing aspects of this Putinization trend.
Okay.
The Vanity Fair article you shared describes how Trump and Musk are governing by meme,
Yeah.
using trolling and grifting as tools of power.
Mm-hmm.
What does that even mean?
It's about this disregard for truth and this willingness to manipulate information for personal gain.
Okay.
They use social media to spread misinformation, to attack their critics, to create a cult of personality around themselves.
Right.
It's a form of propaganda that's often disguised as humor or entertainment, and it's incredibly effective because it appeals to people's emotions and biases.
And it bypasses rational thought and critical analysis.
Absolutely.
It's like they're playing a completely different game.
Yeah.
One where the rules don't matter and the only goal is to win no matter the cost.
Exactly. And it's not just about social media, it's about the way they communicate in general.
Yeah.
There's this constant stream of lies, exaggerations, distractions.
Exhausting.
It is, and it's deliberate. They're masters of creating chaos and confusion.
It's like they're trying to exhaust us, wear us down, so that we're just too tired to fight back.
It's a classic authoritarian tactic.
Right.
It's about creating this sense of hopelessness and apathy
Right.
so that people just give up and accept the status quo no matter how bad it gets.
So it's not just about the specific policies or actions they take.
Yes.
It's about the way they communicate, the way they frame reality,
Absolutely.
the way they manipulate our emotions.
Exactly. And it's incredibly insidious because it can be difficult to recognize and to counter.
Right.
We're bombarded with so much information from so many different sources
Yeah.
that it's hard to know what to believe.
Right. And they exploit that confusion and uncertainty to their advantage.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to be critical consumers of information, to be aware of bias,
Okay.
and to seek out a diversity of viewpoints. We can't just accept everything we see or hear at face value.
Right. We need to think for ourselves, to question assumptions and to demand evidence.
And be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers. Anyone who promises easy solutions
Yes.
to complex problems. Anyone who demonizes their opponents and portrays themselves as the only savior.
Absolutely. Those are all red flags that should make us very wary.
Yeah.
You know, authoritarian leaders thrive on division and fear.
Yeah.
They need an enemy to rally against a scapegoat, to blame for all of society's ills.
So it's not just about Trump and Musk, or even about the U.S. It's about this global trend,
It is
a shift in consciousness, a willingness to accept authoritarianism as the new normal.
Yeah, that's a chilling thought, but it's one we need to grapple with. If we're going to resist this trend,
Right.
we need to understand it, we need to talk about it, and we need to work together to find solutions. It's those checks and balances that are being systematically dismantled right now.
Yeah.
It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
Yeah.
We see the warning signs, we know the dangers,
Right.
but we seem powerless to stop it. But we're not powerless. That's the point of this whole deep dive.
Right.
To empower ourselves with knowledge, to understand the forces at play, and to find ways to resist. We've talked about contacting our representatives, supporting organizations that are fighting for democracy,
Yeah.
being critical consumers of information. what else can we do? It
Yes.
feels so huge, you know? Like, what can one person really do to change the course of all this?
I hear you. It's easy to feel insignificant in the face of such massive shifts,
Right.
but it's precisely in those moments that our individual actions matter the most. Think of it like this. A single raindrop might not seem like much,
Right.
but when millions of raindrops fall together, they can carve canyons and change the course of rivers. Our individual actions, when combined with the actions of others, can create a powerful force for change.
Okay, that's a great analogy.
Mm.
It makes me feel a little less helpless.
Mm-hmm.
But still, practically speaking, what can we actually do?
One of the most powerful things we can do is to have those difficult conversations with our friends and family members who might be falling prey to this authoritarian rhetoric. It's not about attacking them or trying to change their minds overnight.
Right.
It's about planting seeds of doubt, about asking questions, about sharing alternative viewpoints, and maybe most importantly, listening.
Okay.
Really listening to their concerns and trying to understand where they're coming from.
So often it feels like we're all just talking past each other,
Oh.
shouting our opinions into the void.
Right.
Maybe a little more listening is what we all need right now.
Exactly. And remember, empathy is key.
Mm.
People are often drawn to authoritarian leaders because they feel unheard, disenfranchised, and left behind.
Right.
We need to create spaces where they feel safe to express their frustrations and to have their voices heard without judgment.
And we need to offer alternative solutions. Solutions that are rooted in democracy, equality, and justice.
Absolutely.
Solutions that offer hope and opportunity, not just fear and division.
Exactly. And solutions that address the underlying causes of their anger and resentment.
Okay.
That's what's missing from this whole Putinization playbook. A genuine attempt to understand and address the root causes of people's grievances.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it just throws fuel on the fire, exploiting those grievances to consolidate power and silence dissent.
Okay, so have those tough conversations, listen with empathy, offer alternative solutions.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we do to push back against this Putinization trend?
Don't underestimate the power of your vote. Make sure you're registered to vote and vote in every election from local school boards to national races.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like our vote doesn't matter,
Right.
especially in a system that often feels rigged against us.
Yeah.
But our vote is our voice.
It is.
And it's the most fundamental way we participate in our democracy.
Exactly. And don't just vote. Get involved in the political process. Volunteer for campaigns. Donate to candidates who support your values.
Okay.
Contact your elected officials and let them know what issues you care about.
Right. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yep.
It requires active participation from all of us.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the power of protest. When those in power refuse to listen, when they ignore our calls for change,
Yeah.
we have a right to take to the streets and make our voices heard. Peaceful protest is a cornerstone of any democracy, and it's a powerful tool
Right?
for holding those in power accountable.
Okay, so vote, get involved, and protest peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we do to protect our democracy?
Support organizations that are fighting for democratic values, for civil liberties, for social justice. There are countless organizations working tirelessly to protect our rights and to hold those in power accountable. Donate to them. Volunteer your time. Amplify their message on social media.
Right. These organizations are on the front lines of this fight, and they need our support.
They do. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, never give up hope.
Okay.
This is a long-term struggle and there will be setbacks, but we can't afford to succumb to despair or cynicism.
That's easier said than done sometimes. It can feel pretty bleak out there.
I hear you. But remember, throughout history, movements for change have always faced incredible odds. And yet, time and time again, people have come together, organized, and fought for a better world, and they've won.
You're right. There's power in hope.
Yeah.
Hope is what fuels our actions, what drives us to keep fighting, even when the odds seem insurmountable.
Exactly. Hope is not passive. It's an active choice. It's a decision to believe that a better world is possible and to work towards making that vision a reality.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into some truly turbulent waters. It's been a heavy conversation,
It has.
but I think it's one that we all need to be having.
I agree. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day chaos and to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges we face.
Right.
But it's important to step back, to see the bigger picture, and to remember that we have the power to shape our own future.
So stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, stay hopeful. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.